this time, I would like to introduce my esteemed colleague, Professor Annette Johnson. Let me tell you a little bit about Professor Johnson. She has over 20 years of experience in school administration and leadership, and she continues to develop innovative, system-wide professional development opportunities like this one for school social workers. And really the purpose is to enhance all of our clinical skills in service with marginalized populations. So with much gratitude for her leadership and contributions to our field, I introduce Professor Annette Johnson.
Good afternoon. I am Annette Johnson, as Professor Owens indicated, and I chair the Jane Addams Training Institute for School Social Work Professionals. I bring you greetings today on behalf of Dean Creasy Harrison, who extends her best wishes to each of you for a rich learning experience. As I watched the chat, I noticed a lot of people giving lots of expressions about how you're feeling today. So I know some said exhausted, but glad to be here. Others said excited, but we are certainly excited to have you here today. So on behalf of the Institute, we really welcome you to today's session. And we really recognize that you are taking time out of your day after working a full day to attend this session today. So we really appreciate that. Our theme today is embracing the new normal, addressing the social and emotional needs of students during COVID-19. As an institute, we take pride in presenting cutting-edge research and interventions to assist practitioners in the field. Because of the pandemic, we are in uncharted times, so we don't have all of the answers. But as a college and as an institute, we're willing to step out and lead the way in having these challenging conversations regarding ways to support our students and our families. So having said that, I am really pleased to introduce our presenter for today, who will lead the discourse and our discussion for this afternoon, Ms. TaMia West. Ms. West holds a master's degree from the Jane Addams College of Social Work, so we really are proud to have her back with us this afternoon. She also holds a Master's of Arts in Education from Olivet University. Ms. West was a social work manager with Chicago Public Schools for 7 years and is currently the Director of Special Education at Eyas, Landon, a private pediatric clinic. Ms. West's professional interests include special education policy and practice, evidence-based interventions, and school leadership. Again, we're so pleased to have Ms. West today, so please welcome her.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson and the entire committee for creating this opportunity and giving us the space to talk about such an important topic. I hope that the information that I provide today is something that you can carry with you, not only in your professional endeavors, but your personal endeavors as well. I try to focus on information that will cultivate who we are as mental health providers, but also cultivate who we are as people, working with children and families, supporting our educators, and even administration. Well, one thing about embracing the new normal is technology. So today is going to be a reflective discussion for sure. Please use the chat. For this discussion, I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm also going to pose some questions where it's not necessarily I'm looking for an answer from you, but it's just something to think about. So it's more rhetorical than anything. There are 4 points or 4 targets that I really want to focus on today. One being overviewing the impact of COVID-19. And I say that to say not that we're out of COVID-19, but that we're still in it. Review and discuss the social, emotional, and behavioral supports that can promote and sustain engagement. And then I will share tips, tools, some strategies, and resources. Throughout the presentation, I have a lot of links to different articles, different websites. So I will point those out so that when the presentation is shared later, you'll be able to see or go back to those different links for yourself. And then the last part we will talk about is just identifying continuing efforts. This is an ongoing process, but I think that when we come together as a unit, right, as a collective, we can get to a place where we can possibly see a little light at the end of the tunnel. So new normal. I want you to take a minute and please feel free to share in the chat. What do you think about this phrase, new normal? And how would you operationally, meaning how would you define it for the context in which you're in? So if you are an intern, if you are a school social worker, if you are an educator, how would you define it for what you do? And then the last part, what do you make of the phrase from the image as you see it to the right? We'll take about a couple minutes to do that. Evolving, ever changing. It's coming so fast, so I'm trying to catch them. Flexible, always willing to improvise. I think that's an important one. Unknown. Transition, yes. And please continue to add to the chat. The image here, when I looked at it, the first thing that came to my mind was the word or. I didn't see anything else. My eyes immediately went to or. So I took it as new or normal. Is it really something new or is it normal? The second word or phrase that I saw from the image was EW, EW. And I read it off as, ooh, normal. Like, this isn't quite right. This isn't the normal that we're used to. And from there, when I set in the questions there, this is what came to my mind, new normal, able or willing. And the reason I put able is because it implies that it's something we can do. We have the skill set, we have the energy, we have the tools. Willing, though, means the motivation we have behind doing the work to learn and unlearn. So the unlearn is the flexibility. It is recognizing the unknown. And it's also the evolution to maintain balance. So that's what we're trying to do, not only for our students, but for ourselves. So this is a new approach to navigating our world as we see it today. Because tomorrow, what we have learned from COVID-19 is it can be something totally different in just a day's time. So when we're talking about reflecting on the impact of COVID-19, one thing we have to do is think about just the insurmountable changes that children have experienced within one single day. Now think about it from the lens of a week to a month. School started in August. Some of you, it may have started at the end of July, depending on the type of school setting you're in. And from that time to now, how many changes have occurred? I can give you one example. In the clinic that I'm in, the program, we saw a spike in COVID cases. From one single classroom, the classroom closed at least 4 times within 2 months. So we're talking about frequent changes for children with severe disabilities. So think about that for a child whose disability may not be severe or may be a Gen Ed student. The amount of changes that occur within a 2-month span. So when we're recognizing the impact of COVID, we're looking at it from the social emotional behavioral perspective. And this information came from the United States Department of Education. I included a link in this presentation, and I encourage all of you to follow their webpage because they put updates maybe like monthly. And a lot of their information is coming from various states and different organizations, but it's very rich and it's very contextual and practical. So I put this here because it's going to help us later in the presentation. And when we're talking about COVID, the social piece, so how our children relate, not only to their provider, but also to their friends, to their teachers, to their families, and then the emotional, how they feel. Some of them may have expressed to us how they felt during this entire time, but a lot of children have not been very vocal about how they feel about the pandemic. And then the behavioral piece, that's what we can see. That may be low behaviors, anxiety, depression. It may be high behaviors, so some impulsivity or hyperactivity. But each category had a different impact on how children responded or how students responded to the pandemic. Some experienced concerns in just the emotional category, but others experienced the concerns in all three. And as an adult, I think I experienced concerns in all three. So I can only imagine how children felt within each of the categories. So as a related service provider or as a teacher, what about the students who remained unknown? The ones that maybe someone told you about them, but you never laid eyes on that student. Maybe the principal or assistant principal asked you to see the child, but every time you went to go get the child, they were unavailable, or they had an excuse, or they really didn't want to be bothered when you came to speak with them. So what about them? When we're thinking about impact, one of the articles that I read stated that COVID didn't shift mental health concerns related to students. If anything, it increased it. It intensified what was already an existing crisis. And within that same article, it stated that 3.5 million children received some form of mental health support, dated back to 2018. Of the 3.5 million children that received mental health supports, those who have public insurance receive most of their supports where? In the school setting. So when you think about that as a related service provider, think about how many students or the stress you feel when you get a number of referrals, or when you have a teacher that wants to recommend half their class, or when you have a school administrator that wants you to implement a program, but you don't have all of the resources. And I think about 2018 was the time when even Chicago Public Schools introduced this idea of having a social worker in every school, but that was in response to the research that was done by the United States Department of Education that said, a lot of our children are getting supports in schools. What do we need to do at the school level to prepare? What do we need to do at the school level to support? And even with that, the inequities. So every school district, every school within a district, they don't receive the same services. They don't even have the same number of human capital. And when I say human capital, I mean the providers, school social workers, school counselors, school psychologists, mental health service providers that are coming from outside placements, but they're contracted through the school district. And then the inadequacies, just not having enough resources, right, to support what children need, what adults need in order to support the children. So there was a significant number of youth who were previously fine. they were healthy, they were stable, but even they experienced a new onset of depression, anxiety, fear. So we already had a group of 3.5 million students, right, that were receiving mental health supports. Now we have a new group of students who need the same amount of support, if not more. So last year, August, I did this presentation and I was talking about ability versus disability. And the first word that I had there was consider, ability versus disability. But now I'm at a place, because of things I've heard from parents or things that I've heard from other colleagues, what is the impact on ability, what our students can do versus disability when we've tried these different things, we've implemented these different interventions and it's still not working. Perhaps, maybe we need to do some form of an evaluation to determine if the child has a disability. So there's been an increase in referrals, students being referred for special education services because teachers feel like they're not at grade level. But I also heard a teacher say, most students now, it's not a surprise if they are 1 to 2 grade levels behind. So is that a disability? Not necessarily. I'll even give you an example of a child here in the clinic. He has had a lot of gaps in his education, COVID, hospitalizations. And when we were thinking about the type of supports he needed, the very first thing that I remember saying to the team was, you can't consider it a disability just yet because we haven't been able to assess the needs. So when emotional needs go unaddressed, they do look like, the things that we see, depression, anxiety. They may seem unmotivated. So then you see gaps in learning, but that's because the supports aren't there or haven't been there just yet. And then when you think about the interventions and then the school-based mental health supports, if they're not successful, and successful not being that you did something wrong, but maybe the student isn't receiving the information, then would you consider it an area of disability, or is it the child just isn't able to do it yet? So the pandemic caused major forms of changes and losses. And I say this to say, we have to position ourselves to be a little bit more unique and intentional about what we're seeing. So the type of data we're collecting, so that we're not overdiagnosing or misdiagnosing students. School reintegration. So I say a recurring effect because we talked about this at the beginning of this school year in August. There were many school districts talking about their reintegration plans, what they wanted to do, what was available for them to do. And one thing that I think might have been missed, but is definitely worth discussing, is every time a child or the child's teacher goes out because maybe they tested positive for COVID, the child coming back to the school is a form of reintegration. And so maybe that part was missed. We saw reintegration as just coming back, all the students coming back in, the fall, and we're going to get ready. But every time a child is out for whatever reason, when we're preparing for them to come back, that's reintegration. So it's not something that goes away, especially now. It's a recurrent effect. And how do we respond to it? What do we do? What are we looking for when we're talking about reintegration? What does it look like? Well, it looks like a lot of enrollment inconsistencies. How many of you had a student or several students that are still out? You haven't seen them. I can tell you, I had 2. Was here in November, We haven't seen them. We haven't heard from them. So it becomes a concern because now you're starting to think about, as yourself, the human side of you, right? As practitioners, we think, where is the child? Are they okay? Do they need anything? So that's what happens with reintegration, the constant in and out, back and forth. It creates enrollment inconsistencies. And then the planning and preparation, not only on the side of administration, but the teachers, the related service providers, the school counselors, any of the stakeholders within the building, planning and preparation is interrupted. You start something and then you have to stop. So that creates this stop and go service delivery model where we're not really following continuity of services, but a lot is happening and it's impacting what we do, how we do it, when we deliver the services. And then what that causes is a lot of splinter skills. And those splinter skills means that children are gaining something, but they're losing other things. So the instructional strategies, and when I say instructional strategies, it's not just academic instructional strategies, but think about the things that you use or you need to deliver service to your students. And so when there's the constant disruption of students being present and then having to leave, it creates a break in how you're able to flow with your instructional day, with the services that you provide. So we have to maintain our intentions, being intentional about what we can do that's realistic and practical, but interventions that we feel will work, interventions that we feel this is something that I can give to the parents and they can do at home. So a lot of the times I am encouraging the therapists that I work with to think about what they can provide to parents in the event something happens, the unknown, right? Having to create this model of evolution is constantly changing. And then inspirations, I think about the older students, those who've kind of been on this wave of different things, isolation, not being able to be around their friends, not really understanding what's going on. But how do we create inspirations for our students? Is that something that we do with the bulletin board? Is that something that we do with weekly messages? What is it that you are doing as a mental health provider, as a social worker, as a teacher, as a counselor? What are you doing that is going to help inspire your children? So here is a link. I'm not going to click on it, but this was a web page that has a list of different considerations for school providers. So what you can do has different resources, a lot of rich information. And I encourage you, when you receive this presentation, to go back to it and look at it. There are a lot of things you can pull from it and use it in your daily interactions with students, with families, and even with educators. Engagement, tips, tools, and strategies. Students must know that they matter, but how they matter depends on the approach that we take as adults. And in order to engage the students, one thing that I was thinking about was, how do we prioritize social emotional learning in a new normal? So if you can take a moment and go to the chat. How would you respond to this question? How do we prioritize social emotional learning in a new normal? Is it something that we have to say differently? Is it something that we have to do differently? How would you respond to that question? So we'll take a few minutes to do that. Wow, Edgar, that's a really great point. Speaking to the general education students, in addition to the students that receive special education services. Kelly, I think grace is now my new favorite word. More pushing services, yes. Oh, I like that, empowering teachers. And later in the presentation, I do have information on empowering teachers too. Yeah, oh, Kristen, absolutely. More SEL supports in class, not just force and academics. I feel like if the SEL piece is not intact, how do we provide those academic supports? How do we even address the educational piece if the SEL piece is not addressed first? Pushing into classrooms, yes. I like that too. Rebecca Dean, reinforcement. Yes, affirmations. These are all really great. Prioritize relationship building. Yes. So the very first thing that came to mind, and I heard this from a therapist, and they stated that the pandemic felt like there were a lot of things that were going on. I didn't know, like, when was it a good time to talk about certain things, because everyone had a different reaction. And everyone continues to have a different reaction about different things related to the pandemic. And our children are watching it and they're listening to it, you know, different platforms, social media platforms. And the very first thing that came to my mind was, how do we cultivate emotional safety? So in order to prioritize social emotional learning, we have to cultivate emotional safety. Safety meaning the physical place, but also the environment that we are creating for students to come in and speak. And even if they don't want to speak, for students to be able to come in and know that, I'm sorry, I just caught Rebecca, which is, I'll get to that. So that students know that it's okay. And for younger children, what cultivating emotional safety looks like when they're young, and I do this a lot, I tend to meet them at the entrance, right? So the classroom that I was talking about, where the children had to, you know, the classroom was closed due to exposure. Every day that when the children came back, I met them right outside at the car. And it was just my way of just getting them at the very beginning of the day, coming with the therapist to get the children. And then before jumping into the work, actually doing something with them to regulate their mind, to regulate their body. A lot of children came in very, you know, hyper or very anxious. But you have to do something at the very beginning of the day in order to work with our smaller children and engaging them in play. Emotional safety is not always about addressing the feelings before, you know, they exacerbate, but it's really about creating an environment where it's comfortable, where they can play, where they can engage, and they can access the environment the way they feel. And then creating those clear and concise communication spaces. What goes in, so what you're pouring into the children is equally important as what they're telling you. So what's coming out. So it has to be a two-way street. It has to be balanced between the input and the output. And so a lot of the communication spaces may look like sending an email, or it may be sending a letter home to the parents. But because of COVID, we have to limit the FaceTime. All of that looks very different. So you have to get creative. And one of the things about creating a clear and concise communication space is how you do it. So lately, I've been taking large pieces of butcher paper and I hang them up on the wall, and I'll put a message, I'll put a quote, or I may put a word or ask a question. And literally, they can come up, they can write on it, and I leave a little cup with markers. I work with a therapist who does this. She will write the message, we'll decorate it. We do all of this stuff so that the adults in the building can write how they're feeling, but also it's a way to do it with children too. So you can put a sticky note up on the board, and we leave it up for about a week or 2 weeks, and we change it out every month. So that's how we're creating these spaces. You don't want to, some aren't comfortable touching, or some aren't comfortable, sitting in a small space because of, the COVID restrictions that may be enforced at your particular school district or school, but just creating those opportunities for you to see what children are saying. I think I was surprised by some of the messages that I read, but we gave them the space to do that. And then making the connections, not only connecting with the people in the building, but connecting with outside agencies. So agencies may not be able to come into your school, but I'm at the point now where I'm asking, well, is there anything that you can drop off? Or is there anything that you can donate that you feel like this will be great information for parents to have, or information for students to have? So looking at that. In the link that I'll share at the end, the U.S. Department of Education even mentioned how school districts could connect with universities, colleges and universities, and just asking them what they're doing with their own students, so that it doesn't look like there's one thing happening with higher education, there's another thing happening in elementary and high school education. But really, it's on a continuum, and we're working together. So I do that a lot. Since I've been here at the clinic, we've been doing a lot of work with other universities, just making sure that we're using the right strategies, that we're using the right approaches. Examples of the word, sure. So every month we do a theme, just to give you some practical ideas. This month was, I love that I am ... And so the children had to fill in what they loved about themselves. And the message for the therapists and the teachers here was, what do you love most about your colleagues? In January, it was go for the goal, GOAL, go for the goal. And we put the message up. And they just had to talk about what's one goal that they wanted to accomplish either this month, this quarter, or 2022. Another example I can give of a word that we put up, what does it mean to be thankful? So in the month of November and December, we were talking a lot about grace. We were talking about gratitude. And we were teaching the children, what does it mean to be appreciative? And so we putting up these different words, and then we would include it in a newsletter to the parents so that they knew what we were talking about. And we were encouraging parents to use the same words and language within the home environment so that children can see that the supports are more, what's the word that I'm looking for? Comprehensive. Like, so it's, they're not just getting it at school, but they're also hearing it at home and in the community. So that's what we do. Every month is a different theme. And it's kind of unique. I would encourage you to think about doing it. I didn't include it in the presentation, and I'm sorry about that, but maybe I can get the information to Ms. Johnson. But we did this also as a way for teachers and the therapists to connect with the children, and everybody is on this one common thread. So with this month being I love that I am, therapists, our physical therapists would use it as, I love that I'm flexible when they're working with the children on flexibility and body parts and movements. With social work, it was I love that I am. A lot of students, getting them to use more feeling words than just happy, excited. But we were trying to expand their vocabulary. So I can put it together and definitely send it to Ms. Johnson. Conceptualize facts, functional and comprehensive tools for student success. So I encourage you to build like a library of tools, things that you can carry over school year after school year. And I started to create one. I'll share that as well. I'm not certain if it's in the presentation, but it's just a list of tools. And I do have some of the sites within this presentation. but it's tools that focus on social emotional learning at the school level, but also what does social emotional learning look like when you're provided as a service to the students, be it an individual service or a group service? What does it look like when you're talking about social emotional learning through collaboration with a teacher? So this last part, collaborate. Someone put in the chat about it can't just be academics, and you're right. So this video focuses on how we need to shift our thinking, things that we used to do, words that we used to say, like we love to say differentiated instruction. And a lot of people's like, well, what does that mean? What does differentiated instruction mean? What does it mean to be trauma informed? What does it mean to do social emotional learning for a first grader? Like, how does all of this look? And in order for us to collaborate, we have to be able to engage. And when we engage, we can empower our students. So we're not just focused on being compliant, meaning we're getting the work done, we're completing the IEP, we are completing the assessment, we're writing the goals. But in everything that we're doing, we are empowering our students. Even through COVID, we're still giving them spaces and opportunities where we are able to empower them. So let me show you this video. Can someone put a yes, you can hear it in the chat? I'm not certain if the,
Yes, we hear it.
okay, perfect.
We often talk about what it means to move from compliance to engagement. It's the idea of creating an environment where students want to learn rather than have to learn. But if we want students to be creative, self-directed learners, we need to move beyond student engagement and into empowerment. But this requires some paradigm shifts. That's right, we are going to be talking shift. Here's what I mean. The empowered classroom is a shift from giving choices to inspiring possibilities. It's a shift from making the subject interesting into tapping into the student interest. When you go from saying you must learn this to asking, what do you want to learn? It's a shift from taking assessments to assessing your own learning. An iterative process full of mistakes that ultimately lead to success. It's a shift from the teacher asking all the questions to the students asking their own questions, where they chase the inquiry process and take learning off-road. It's a shift from uncritical consuming to critical consuming and creating. Here students move from critical consuming to inspiration to creativity, where they use the design process to launch their work to the world. It's a shift from differentiating instruction to personalizing learning. And it's a shift from rigid to adjustable systems so that students own the process. They can set their own pace, choose their own formats, and decide what resources they want to use to accomplish their goals. It's a shift in mindset from compliance to self-direction. In other words, it's a shift towards student ownership. And when that happens, our students become the creative, critical thinkers who change the world.
Tell me in the chat what you think about what the gentleman was saying about engagement, shifting. Use a lot of buzzwords in this video, I thought. Paradigm shift, personalized learning, of course, empowerment, differentiated instruction. When I watched the video, I was like, yeah. He is tapping into all of the words that we use in education, that we hear a lot. I'm coming through the chat. New perspective. New perspective. Sounds like PBIS. I didn't think about that, Carrie, but that's a good point. Shifting to student ownership, absolutely. Building on strengths, yes. Are any of you thinking how you can get to these different steps that he mentioned? You know, what vehicle are you going to use to get to this whole idea of empowerment? Absolutely, expectations need to be reevaluated system-wide, definitely. So I'm seeing here a lot of questions about what about the younger ones? Okay, which is great, and we have. Let me look at the time. Okay, so let me say this. Where I am currently, the youngest is 6. That is the chronological age, but the mental age is about 3. And the oldest here is about maybe 10. And so the same video that was played, I use a lot of visuals with the children here. We use a lot of visual supports with the children. So when we're talking about empowerment, with the younger children, empowerment looks like choice. So we give them a choice board. You can have this or you can have that. And we allow them to pick it. And on the board, we use a lot of Velcro here so that the children can take it off, put it back on. We also use a lot of if then with our younger children. If you do this, then you can do that. So it's really just a shift in the language and how you are presenting the material when you're thinking about your younger children. We use a lot of star charts. So when we're talking about empowerment, we present the information to the children, and if they get it right, they get a star. If they need something, we give them a visual board where they can select what they need. If they need a break, we give them a visual so that they can select what they need. So that's how we're creating or shifting, I would say, the mindset of our younger children. We're giving it back to them to choose. We're not choosing for them. We're not assuming we know. So that's the difference. A lot of times, honestly, even our oldest student that's not here receives a lot of services within the home setting. Even they like the choice board, knowing that they can choose for themselves what they want to do versus being told they have to do something. For our children, if you work with children who are nonverbal, if you're thinking about them as well, we try to build it in their program. So if they have an AAC device, then the same thing that we give to our children who are verbal, we do it in the program for our nonverbal students. So it can be done. It's just how you change the approach. And also being practical when you do it. Practical limits burnout. Not looking for something huge, not looking for something big, but it's the simple, small achievements that you want in order to get to the desirable end. Even taking it back to like when you're asked to do certain things and you're getting a lot of referrals or you have a lot on your plate at school, you have to break it down so that it works for you, that it makes sense for you as well. Because at the end of the day, if the oxygen mask is not on you, then you won't be able to do any of the recommendations or implement any of the tips and tools that are being provided. So I always take it back to, for myself as a practitioner, what can I do that's going to be simple yet achievable, is going to work? And so I feel like a lot of times we place ourselves in big categories that we want to get things accomplished, but it's really the small things. Start there and then work your way up. So the continuing efforts to support the school and to support the social emotional health of the school community. And when I say school community, that includes you, not the school community and you as a provider, supporting the needs of the school community. No, you're a part of the school community. And that is what is the cornerstone of engagement. It's the efforts. What are we doing in terms of our efforts to engage our students, to engage the school community, to even engage and fulfill what we need in order to continue to do this work? So I'm gonna kind of talk about the tips and tools together. The first tool that I want to point to, the one that says overcoming obstacles. That is an online platform that has SEL modules and it's free. And I highly recommend that you check it out. That is a live link. So let's see. And hopefully you can still see this. So I literally went to the high school one because a therapist recommended this. And when I went to the high school one, just playing around to see what it entailed, I was curious about the decision-making one. And so this is an actual lesson. So you can download the module. You go to decision-making, and these are all of the lessons that's built in the activity sheets, and it's all free. We like free stuff. It's an amazing resource. For those of you who have the younger students and you were asking about them, I highly recommend that you download the curriculum. This is the complete curriculum. One thing that you can do that's a great recommendation, I think, is taking it out and maybe you do a lesson a week, or you create something where you're doing listening for a month, or you're focusing on coping skills and cooperation for the month of March. So think about doing it that way too, but it's all downloadable. And again, it's free. So that goes with that, making SEL and mental health a part of the instructional day. When you're able to identify resources that you can utilize that's free, you can make them a part of the instructional day. And so some of that looks like, when I was talking about how we do this monthly thing, I outlined for the therapists and the parents what it is that we're going to be talking about. So what type of books might I use to facilitate this theme of I love that I am? And so I identify different books. We do a book of the month. We may do a book of the week. And it's all tied into whatever lesson it is that I'm implementing. So definitely think about that one. Changemakers curriculum. This, I don't believe is free, but what's very unique about this curriculum is that it integrates SEL with the academic piece. And it is a school-wide approach. So it has the supports for not only the children, the students, but it's also for the educators, for the administration as well. So I would definitely encourage you to kind of peruse this website, because if you are someone that has some influencing power over your administration, and say they have additional funding for you to purchase something, I would highly recommend you taking a look at Changemakers curriculum. Supportive SEL programs. This is actually from CASEL, and they have 77 different programs that you can use, that you can implement. They give you all of the information, the student characteristics, which is great, so that you can make sure that the lesson aligns with your student population. You can also filter it. So for those of you who are looking for more materials and information, you can filter it for your pre-K, K, and first grade students if you work with those lower grade levels. But definitely take a look at this website. There were a few of them on here that was great. And look, change makers is on there again. So, and it's evidence-based too. So you always want to look for the ones that are evidence-based. The character effect. So this is how like we impact school culture and climate. Another great social emotional program. So they have different things that you can do, be it on a yearly basis, monthly, weekly, daily, and it's broken down by stakeholder, teachers, students, parents. This is another great resource for school social workers. Again, if you have that connection with your administration and they're looking for things to build up their MTSS, especially tier 1 interventions, definitely take a look at the character effect and Changemakers curriculum. I put here, everyone has a role, and I saw someone put in the chat in terms of empowerment, working with their student to build the IEP. I think that is amazing. Always consider the age, but also it's just amazing for students to know what services they're receiving and why they're receiving the services. So that is definitely important, and I'm glad that you shared that. I put here creating a monthly or quarterly themed newsletter. It doesn't even have to be themed, but how are you highlighting the mental health supports and resources within your own setting? So what's going on at the school level? What are you doing? I always see it as, I just want parents to know like what I'm doing. So this is my wheelhouse, social emotional learning. This is something that I like to do. And I'm always sharing resources in the monthly newsletter with parents, and I'm drawing their attention to a specific word, a specific strategy, because I also have to consider, you know, I don't know necessarily the education level of my parents, and there could be a language barrier. So I'm always cognizant of that, you know, and that is something that I do recommend for you too. When you are giving information to your families, always think about that piece. I'm going to go straight here to this: ensure equity in our decision-making about SEL and student mental health. So this information came from Castle's site. And it was talking about how do you lever equity, lever for equity and excellence. I know I'm saying I'm giving you all so much stuff, but I highly recommend that you read this. We continue to hear about this word equity, but what does it look like when we're talking about social emotional learning, mental health supports? What does all of that mean? How do we conceptualize that for our students? And so this is great content for you to review. It talks about diverse cultures, the different strategies that you can use. How do you uplift students' voice, which is what we talked about earlier in the video, the empowerment piece. But I wanted to include this in here for you. Because I know it can be challenging, especially now. But I think when you are able to arm yourself with the literature, with the research, with the content, it makes a huge difference when you are selecting what to do for your students, when to do it, and why you're doing it. Oh, wow. Someone said they students make IEP presentations. Yes, definitely. When you talk about presentations, we took a project with the children here, and we wanted to know what their greatest gift was. So that was our December theme. And our children who have IEPs, it was a project to do with their families. they took these gift boxes and created on the gift box different visuals that made them unique and what was their greatest gift. And they talked about their family. So I'm telling you, when I say you can utilize different things, utilize different things. And the IEP presentation is a wonderful idea. So yeah, we just took little boxes, little gift boxes, nothing big. And the students put pictures on there. The families work with the children to get it done. So these are great ideas that you can utilize. And I think the other thing that it does, it creates an environment where we're not just focused on the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic, but we're really focusing on the students, what they need and what we can provide to them to be successful. So MTSS, you know, the main thing that works with MTSS, and the reason I put this here, is definitely tier 1. Whatever we're doing at the foundation, be it the morning welcome, morning circle time, we created these different areas in the day for the therapists and the teachers to give the students the space to kind of like have this morning meeting where they're talking about how they're feeling about the day, how their morning started, what they're looking forward to in the day. But it just changed the flow of the day. It changed the environment where we are really inviting the students in to tell us about what they're doing, how they're thinking, what they're feeling. And then we can, you know, adjust, or we can flex based on how they respond. Utilizing evidence-based interventions, absolutely, working with your BHT or if you have a CARES team. And then tier 3, just those individualized, more intensive supports. And educating teachers on mental health. So I believe I can just go to it. There is an article here when we're talking about how to execute these different things. Here it is right here. Connecting teacher practice with social emotional learning. Another great resource. But it's basically just talking about the alignment. You know, we talk about collaborating with teachers, consulting with teachers, but what does it look like? Especially for teachers who are new to the teaching profession, teachers who may not know a lot about how to work with students who have disabilities, or teachers who don't know how to provide social emotional supports to the entire classroom. But take a look at this. This is a video, but also they have the printable transcript. And there are other resources on this site as well. So this is another, I would say, item to put in your toolkit. The administration. So that's huge. The type of relationship you have with your administrators is definitely going to drive all the things you can do. And sometimes it's not even the administrator. In one of my school districts, the person who had the power was the receptionist. So think about that. Who holds the power in your school district, and how can you leverage them to help you in delivering the social emotional supports? How can you leverage them to help you engage the students? And then highlighting and reviewing our role. A lot of times, who we are as school social workers is not always correctly understood. And so what is it that you can do to highlight? Maybe you have to re-highlight it and review your role as a school social worker. One thing, let me go back. One thing I'll say is you got to put it out there what you do as a school-based mental health provider, what you do, how you do it, when you do it, and then creating boundaries around that as well. Because I know, being in the school myself, that sometimes they just come. The teachers, they come. They bring the students to you, or they will send you all kind of emails and all kind of messages, but creating the boundaries so that you're not burnt out, that you still have enough energy to keep going for yourself and the things that you want to do with your students. So that's important as well. And then developing plans for ongoing support. Those plans can include the students. So the students working with you to create their own individualized learning plan. We created little books for the children here. And it was just like things that they wanted to do. And they could pick the picture if they didn't have the words. They could pick a picture, or we would present a field of 3 pictures and they could pick one on things that they wanted to do. So we were creating these plans so that we knew what to look forward to in the spring. I think that's the unique thing about what we're able to do. And that is, we can create the language. It's all in how we deliver it. So making sure I'm good on time. Okay, I think I'm good on time. Okay, so it's just some main takeaways for today. Stop, think, practice. This should probably look familiar to a lot of us who may use this when we're working with our children in terms of that whole anger management piece and using cognitive behavior therapy. But I just want you to stop and think about, because the students seem okay or they present to be fine, it doesn't mean that they are fully grasping or adjusting to the new normal. And think about barriers that may prevent students and adults from effective engagement. So think about that. And I actually want you to type in the chat, what do you think are some barriers to you being able to effectively engage your students? It could be a financial barrier, meaning the resources at the school level. A barrier could be space. Space may not be available. Time. Aisha, you said it the same time. Caseload, time and resources. Yes. Lack of private space. Yes, absolutely. Good point. The wait list. These are all the common one, the common two, space and time. Lack of referral sources. Yes. I feel like the referral sources, now that I've read the article talking about the percentage of children that receive mental health supports only in school, has me thinking about, that lack of referral sources. High absentee rates, yep, the long wait time. These are all great. Truancy, absolutely. Absolutely. So to respond to some of these, what I think is very helpful in terms of putting it into practice, so I've created in my mind this new way of doing things. How do I try to reach all of these families, all of the families that we service within a reasonable amount of time? And I'm sure you all can think about that as well for your students and families. But just categorizing it in terms of what you can do within the school day. And so just on a whim, I put up, well, I didn't put it up. We had a bulletin board put up, and it's the adults bulletin board. And on the board, we share information. We may put resources, and we kind of thought it was just like, maybe it was a waste of time and they wouldn't look at it. but a lot of the adults here in the facility appreciate it. They appreciated being able to look up and see like, oh, that's an actual place. That's an actual resource. That's something I can do. Like literally on the board, it said tips for the week of February 14th. And we just list simple tips. If there was an update related to COVID, that's shareable, whereas anybody can see it. We put it on the board as well. So it really limited the amount of foot traffic or the emails that one provider would receive because they could literally go to the board. So think about that. Do you have an office space? And if you don't have an office space, is there something that you can put in the office? Definitely. I'm looking at Landon's response. But I encourage you to think about that. There are so many things that we can't control, but there are so many things we can control. And even for our children who are experiencing those outside factors, like the message that was just put in the chat, I'm always going to leave them with something. I always leave my children with something. I say my children, because that's how I feel. I feel like students, no matter how old they are children from 8 to 3, just considering the general range of the school day. But I'm always thinking, what can I leave them with? And if I'm not present, what can I leave them with? And I encourage you to think about that in terms of how to put it into practice. Even when you're not present, you may be off, you may be working with another student, you may be in a meeting. What do you leave for your students if they still need to reach you? Is it something you put outside your door? Is it something that they can access in the office? What is that? And if you don't have that, I encourage you to think about it. What does that look like? I have something outside my door. Students know how to get in touch with me even when I'm not there. Therapists know how to get in touch with me even when I'm not there. So think about those different spaces, right? We're talking about cultivating emotional safety. Well, that also includes the space. These little sticky notes here, the school mental health best practices, that's a link to another resource, support at school and home. That's another resource as well. So I'll click on it really quickly just so you can see what it looks like. Here's a guide for teachers to support families and students. So you download the resource here. It is a little lengthy, but it is great information. National Center on Health, Behavioral Health, and Safety. This website is excellent. I encourage you to bookmark it so that you can see all of the information that they're talking about. And this information also came from the U.S. Department of Education as well. So I'm big on giving resources that are practical, and pretty much everything here is practical. And you can use it as well in your daily practices. This one, school mental health best practices, this is a great link too. And so they actually have 2 manuals. I encourage you to download them. And it talks about these different things here: roles for educators, collaboration and teaming, cultural responsiveness, and the buzzword again, equity, data-driven decision-making. I mean, there's so much stuff here that you can refer back to, but I encourage you to create some time in your day to go back to this information. I think that's one thing that's important as a profession. the amount of resources that's out there, but because our day is so full and we have a lot going on, we may not be able to look for them. So my intent was to bring them to you. And these are all hyperlinked, but I'm gonna go to this last one. This document to me is like the professional Bible. It's over 100 pages. I did pull some resources and put them in for you, but if you have time, I encourage you to go through it. There's a wide range of material here. Social, emotional, mental health. They talk a lot about LGBTQ to population, what we need to do, how we need to focus on them, early childhood, K-12 students. I mean, the list goes on and on. Really great information here. I'm gonna scroll down to the bottom because a lot of this is like content, but when you get towards the bottom, they talk about challenges and recommendations. Let's see. Here it is, challenges and recommendations. And for this, they include different links and websites that you can go to get this information. The ones that I felt like were germane to school social workers, I included them in my presentation, but there are other ones that I just couldn't get to because it was just so many, but they are great. They have different categories. If you're talking about how do you even promote social emotional wellness, how do you support families, they include links, they give you all the resources, they give you models, different things that you can utilize. So I definitely say, go back to this one. If anything, go back to this one. And the last thing that I want to say, because I'm being cognizant of time, is that, you know, this is not something that we will capture in a day. You know, the pandemic, I say it started off March 2020, and it hit me that I was saying the words, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And this morning I said to myself, I don't know if we're in the middle, the end, or if we in the beginning, just a different beginning. And so that's how I am approaching this, that we're in something. I don't know if it's the middle of it or we're in at the beginning or in at the end. We don't know that, but our students are looking to us for support. They are looking to us to be the answer and to explain to them the why. So if anything, I just try to position myself, and I encourage you to do the same thing. Position yourself to be fluid, to be flexible. And when you go back through this presentation and you look at the different links, you will be able to do just that. It gives so much information that you can utilize, not only for, you know, working directly with the students, but the educators as well, because it's so important that you take care of yourself. And in taking care of yourself, that just means that we as a community are given the space to do that and share these different resources and materials. So to that, I say thank you so much for having me, Jane Addams College of Social Work, Ms. Johnson, for asking me to be a part of this. To the attendees, I hope you walk away with something that you can just, you know, you can take it. Even if it's just one thing, I encourage you to take one thing or two things, maybe three, but utilize it. I don't know if my contact information was even put out there, or Ms. Johnson, if you want me to put it in the chat, but you can always reach out to me. There's so much to be said. I could talk about this for days, but you know, I encourage you all to take one or two things that you can definitely implement. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. TaMia West, for really facilitating today's webinar. I feel like with the questions, and you even answered a lot of the questions as well, but we're still going to try some more edition of a Q&A. But thanks for just coming to speak to us about embracing the new normal and just how you have approached it. Your discussion about addressing the social and emotional needs of not only students, but also teachers and adults during COVID-19 has been very informative, very timely, which is so needed right now during these unprecedented times. At this time, my colleague, Kimberly Jenkins, and I will moderate questions that you might have for Ms. West. I know that many people were asking questions throughout and she was answering throughout. So this might actually go a little quicker than we originally anticipated. So remember that we have enabled the Q&A feature, which is located on your screen. So if you have any remaining questions, you can go ahead and pop them in to be sure that we get to them. Ms. Jenkins?
Yes. Hi, everybody. This was an awesome presentation. So one of the questions is, what common symptoms have you noticed in students during the reintegration?
Common symptoms. The first one I'm going to say anxiety. Anxiety, and I'll say as young as, I'm getting a student in mind, 7. And the anxiety looked like just the constantly moving back and forth, fidgeting, because this was a student who had been out because of exposure and then came back and was twice exposed, had to be out 2 days later. So a lot of anxiety around that. And to respond to the anxiety, what we've been doing differently is, instead of jumping right into the subject, the academic work, we just been doing a different approach and just getting them regulated. So maybe we do we'll read a story, or we'll allow the children to go to our sensory room, because that's what, we have those different resources. But if you don't have a sensory room, then I just encourage you to play. I've been playing soft music, and this children have been asking to listen to music, which is okay, great. But definitely anxiety, and some aggression. Aggression, a lot of stuff is going on, and not having the words has turned into, now I'm just externalizing my behaviors, because I don't know what it is that I'm thinking. I'm just frustrated. So those two, anxiety and aggression.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question. What would you recommend in the case of our little ones who have never been in school and who have never had adequate socialization opportunities? They may have some social skill deficits and struggles to cope, but it's not necessarily a disability.
Play. You have got to play, and keep playing. Because our younger ones, and a teacher said this, I feel like those who are 4, they should be okay because they weren't receiving a lot of academic instruction. But for those who were 5 and was a part of the whole remote learning piece, it's difficult for them because they weren't socializing. The learning environment was literally the home environment. And to address that, you have to play with them, and keep playing, and do imaginative play. It works so well. I play a lot. That's why I was, Ms. Jenkins, I was able to respond so quickly. But yes, you gotta play. And you have to sing a lot of rhyming songs. It's something about the rhythm, those songs, and the beat. It does something to their brain, the synapses. So do your research on it, but yes, play all day. Somebody put in here, yes, play all day.
Okay, thank you. And Professor Owens, did you have any additional questions from our?
Sure. Someone asked, or earlier someone asked about the links, but as you saw her, Mrs. West's PowerPoint is interactive, so you can click on the links and you'll be able to get to that. So that answers that question. I mean, we
Okay.
have another link. I mean, we have another question in the chat, in the Q&A that says, where would you recommend a good starting point in terms of the resources?
A good starting point. Good question. Honestly, I started with the last link that I shared, the one from the U.S. Department of Education. I'm telling you, is very dense sometimes, but they have a lot of great information. That has always been my starting point. I start there, and then I just literally go through just to see what they're talking about, social emotional learning, just that piece. And they have a lot of information. And then I just start with 5 key resources, Rebecca Dean. So I feel like if I have to go to my second hand, I have too much going on. So that is my rule of thumb. Focus 5. I focus on 5 things that I can implement, I can share, or I can communicate to my families. That's how I do it. But starting with that article, and I would say I'm trying to think of which slide it was. The slide that has maybe it was the second to last. There are about 4 links on there. When you get the presentation, it says additional resources. There are 3 links on there. Those 3 links, and then the link from the U.S. Department of Education. That's your 4 right there. I would say start with those 4.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna, I'll leave it open for maybe one more question. Like I said, I know that there was also questions that were being answered throughout, and so I don't want to ignore that.
Let's see.
Someone asked if we can share the links via email. The slide deck will be available to you on our website sometime in March, and the links are there. The links are hot, so you saw how how Ms. West was able to click on the link. She will be able to have that functionality as well. And the good thing about that is she actually lists what the topic was. So if it was something about empowerment, you will be able to click on that link, and so you will have access to that in the coming weeks.
Okay, I see one more. I see one more question that's actually in the chat. You want me to go ahead with that one?
Sure.
Okay, so the question is, what would you suggest for a 6-year-old who's having aggressive behaviors in class, triggers being transitioning and redirection? They are above level in all academic areas and able to use some calming strategies sometimes.
Great question. I was reading it. I thought they was talking about one of the children here. So you listen, in order to be successful with your question, you have to utilize non-contingent reinforcement, meaning that you're not waiting for the child to do something, be it positive or negative behavior. You're giving the reinforcement every 10 seconds. Great job, you did so well. Or every 30 seconds. Great job, you did well. Let's take a break. You take a break for a minute, you come back. Like, it has to be that punctual, especially because of the age. They need the constant repetition, but you have to get in with giving the reinforcement, not waiting on something to happen, but doing it before then. The other thing with transitions, please get you an iPad and a timer. It will save you. So before you even know, like if it's 10 minutes remaining and the next transition may be lunch where they have to leave from the classroom, literally set the timer at that 10-minute mark. And then show the timer to the student to say, hey, we got 10 minutes before we do this. And then show them again when it's 5 minutes, and then again at 2 minutes. And within that time, you're still giving me a non-contingent reinforcement. Thank you so much. Great job waiting. You got to do it with the young children.
Great.
So as we conclude today's webinar, remember the importance of addressing the social and emotional needs of our students, of our colleagues, and also of ourselves. Thanks again for you all for attending. Thank you to the Jane Addams College of Social Work Planning Committee, the communications team here at Jane Addams, and our technology team for organizing another great event. Also, again, thanks to our speaker, our facilitator, our resource giver, Ms. TaMia West, for engaging us in embracing the new normal. We really appreciate your expertise. So that concludes today's webinar. I hope you all have a great day, and thank you and have a lovely evening.